Welcome to ADP's eSocial webinar. Today, we're going to discuss the context of this Brazilian legal compliance program, the government development status, as well as the major steps your company needs to take to be prepared. eSocial will require that your company submits employee and HR-related information through a system that's called web service. All the information will be collected in a single unified database that will be used to serve 4 major government entities that are participating in the eSocial program. There are 2 major moments in the transmission of eSocial information. First, there is the initial load, when the information from the company and the employee will populate the government's database. After that, we start what we call the monthly cycles. In the monthly cycle, every change in your employee population will reflect into eSocial events, such as hiring, terminations, leave of absence, change in employee record information. Those are called non-periodical events. Monthly 2, there is going to be the payroll cycle, when the calculation of payroll and tax and contributions is going to happen. After the transmission of these events, totalizers will be delivered back from the government, indicating the amount of tax and contributions to be paid. Once the eSocial monthly cycle is closed, the company must go to the government's website to recover the invoices and pay for the taxes and the contributions. eSocial events must be delivered in a very specific order. For instance, the employer information is the one that's delivered first to the eSocial environment, followed for the information of all establishments of that employer, and lastly, by the employee information. If there is a problem delivering the information about the employer or their establishments, there is going to be a problem sending the information for the employee. The data on the employer needs to be rectified before the employee information is delivered. Another example of eSocial ordering among events is in regards to the payroll cycle. To close eSocial monthly cycle, you need to have sent all the eSocial related payroll events. And for that to happen, all the events related to your team, your department, has to be sent prior to that. For instance, all the hirings, all the terminations, or all of the leave of absences of that period. eSocial defines 2 major environments. The eSocial pre-production environment has been made available on June 26, 2017. This environment is going to be used by the companies to validate their systems as well as their processes. However, the eSocial pre-production environment presents some restrictions. Only legal entities, companies who have up to 1,000 employment relationships can send to this environment. That means a total of employees, independent contractors, directors, interns. If you have up to 1,000 employment relationships, you can send to that environment. The government implementation status. The government, through the end of June, has been homologation tests with the pilot companies. In July, a new phase starts. The government has opened the pre-production environment. The first month is going to be used by the solution companies to validate their systems. Starting in August through December, the companies will have a chance to submit their information to the pre-production environment and be able to test their systems as well as their processes. The pre-production environment will run over the version 2.2.02 of the eSocial specs. However, in the beginning of July, the government has released a new version. That's the version 2.3. The version 2.3 brings some changes. There is the unification of the initial load of employee record information with the hiring event, as well as an event that will facilitate closing the eSocial monthly cycle if you have some issues in regards to 1 or 2 employees and their payroll. The version 2.3 will be available in the government's pre-production environment starting in beginning of October. So the tests that are going to be executed between July and end of September will be based on version 2.2.02. There are a few other components of the government solution that are still waiting to be deployed in their environment. One of those allows companies to grant permissions for their providers to send events to eSocial utilizing their own digital certificate. Up to October, when we expect that the government will making that available, the companies will need to utilize their own digital certificate to submit the information to the government. Despite the changes and the components that still expected to be deployed in the government's environment, the official dates are maintained. If your company invoiced more than 78 million reals in 2016, it needs to start in eSocial in January 18. Their occupational health and safety environments must be sent 6 months later in July 18. However, if your company invoiced less than 78 million reals in 2016, your first events in eSocial will be in July 2018. The occupational health and safety environment related information is going to be sent 6 months later in January 19. And how is ADP in regards to its development of eSocial? We have concluded the homologation tests involving the government and our pilot companies, and have started to test over the web, utilizing the pre-production environment. We are right now also evaluating the version 2.3 and identifying the major impacts on our system and our processes. Soon, we will be starting to invite our first clients into the pre-production environment. The steps for the rollout of your company into eSocial pre-production and production environment are as follows. The first very important thing is that your company will work on the inconsistencies identified in your database. Those are mandatory in order to be able to successfully start in the production and the pre-production environment of eSocial. Once your inconsistencies are all cleaned up, ADP will notify your company of the next wave of clients starting in the eSocial environment. You're going to receive a number of documents and procedures to be able to start successfully. On the day agreed, ADP will turn some parameters in our system and your eSocial initial load will start to be delivered to the government. You'll be able to verify the status of your initial load transmission through the ADP eSocial dashboard. If there are any errors identified through the process, we'll be able to verify what went wrong and work on the fixing. If everything went all right and your initial load was completed, after that, every single employee-related life cycle events will be transformed into eSocial events and transmitted to the eSocial national environment. For instance, your next hire, a termination, a leave of absence, vacation, when you close payroll. Each of these events will be identified in ADP Expert. We will transform them into eSocial files and will transmit them to the government transparently for you. As mentioned, data cleanse is a very important activity in getting your company prepared for eSocial. We'll make sure that your current database is compliant to all eSocial requirements. There may be missing information due to new fields that were created by eSocial. There may be some information that is incorrect. For instance, zip codes versus the information that is available in the Brazilian Postal Service, as well as some data that is completely correct but requires some mapping in order to be sent to the eSocial national environment. It's important to highlight that inconsistent data will cause rejection of these social events delivered to the government. We have verified this through our testing with pilot companies and the homologation with the government. In order to prevent new information to be saved with potential inconsistencies, ADP has developed a new set of validations. Those validations will be turned on in our system between October and November of this year. This will help make the HR processes of your company more robust and making sure that you capture the right information at the first time. As part of the data cleanse activities, it's important to use a new service that the government has made available. It's called the Worker ID Validation. In Portuguese, is Qualificação Cadastral. This is a service provided in the government's website that will allow you to verify the major points of information that are required to compose the unique ID of an employee against the information available in the government organs. This information is very important because it will work as a unique ID for your employee in the government system. To execute the worker ID validation, first you need to extract the information from ADP Expert. 4 pieces of information are going to be extracted: name, date of birth, piece NEET, and CPF ID. With this file in hand, you will upload this information into the eSocial website. First, you're going to need to log in utilizing your digital certification. After up to 48 hours, the government will return a process file indicating potential discrepancies between your employee record information and information that is available in the government entities. Once identified the inconsistencies, we advise your company to take the following steps. The very first step, and the simplest, is to ask the affected employees to bring their documentation and to verify the information in that documentation against the information that is available on an ADP Expert. If the information matches, you go to the second step, which is to request your employee to call the service 135. That's a government-sponsored service that will help employees to resolve potential database inconsistencies over the phone. It's important that the employee calls having in possession all the documentation. In certain cases, the data cannot be fixed over the phone. In that case, your employee will need to take their documentation and visit one of the government authorities involved in the social program to have their information validated and updated. As you can see, there's a lot of steps, and if you have a lot of employees that are affected and have inconsistencies in the worker ID validation, this may take time. So it is very important that you start as soon as possible. It seems a very cumbersome process, but actually it's very easy. You can get it done. It's very important that you would conclude these steps in the next couple of months to have some time in order to be able to start in the pre-production environment and not suffer any problems in your initial load. As mentioned, the worker ID validation works on the unique ID of the employees, and this information is vital for you starting in the eSocial environment without problems. Next, we would like to share a few figures from our client database. You can see that some of these data inconsistencies are more common than one might think. In average, what we have found is that we have at least 3 to 4 inconsistencies in average per employee. In regards to the worker ID validation, we have verified that in average, 15 to 20% of the workers have some inconsistency in their information. And in regards to dependents, we have found that in average, 30% of the dependents above 12 years old are lacking or have wrong information in that CPF ID data field. This information is mandatory for the initial load into eSocial. In summary, the preparation steps for getting your company ready for eSocial are database cleanse, review and simplify processes, and make sure that you have executive oversight in your progress in eSocial. A couple more reminders. First, EFD Reinf is another program under the SPED initiative in Brazil that will have the same timeline as eSocial. However, the information related to EFD Reinf, it has more affinity with your accounting and your finance area. So ADP will not be providing a product for EFD Reinf as part of its portfolio. So it's important that your company look into EFD Reinf and make a plan on how to implement this in your company. What if your company is just starting its eSocial journey now? It's important to take the following steps. First, make sure to create a multidisciplinary team in your company that will be working on eSocial. Have your legal and finance team to review all the employer-related data, especially the wage types. And prepare your HR team and plan for some employee data review activities for the next couple of months. It's very important that in the next 3 months you'll be concluding your data cleanse activities in order to be in a good shape to start in the eSocial pre-production environment. And that concludes our webinar today. I know it's a lot of information, many activities, and too little time. But if you still have questions, feel free to ask in this channel and we'll be able to answer them. Thank you.